What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have an area of interest tagged over here in the Caribbean Sea. We have this system starting to organize and develop. It looks like this cluster of thunderstorms could do it right here. I was personally not expecting this to get designated this early. I was telling you in yesterday's video, it'd probably be another day or two before it gets tagged. Well, it got tagged last night, and my phone was blowing up and with people on Storms United telling me, Patrick, this thing's really going off. Things are about to get going now. And we also have Gordon over here that isn't really showing much signs of life anymore. It still has a 50% probability of development, but I'm not seeing that much hope of it anymore. But we will go ahead and take a look at that. According to the National Hurricane Center, we will start with Gordon right here, just while I'm at it. An area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms located over the central tropical Atlantic is associated with the remnants of Gordon. The system is forecast to interact with a non-tropical low to its northwest while moving north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour during the next couple of days. Environmental conditions could become more conducive for development this week, and a tropical depression or storm could reform in a few days while the system moves slowly northward over the central subtropical Atlantic. 20% probability in the next 48 hours, 50% probability in the next 7 days. If we go ahead and show you what it was this morning, it was 30 and 60. So those chances have plateaued, and they have started to go down according to the National Hurricane Center. But this area of interest right here is very interesting, considering that they tagged it, as well as just of how consistent all the models have been, and just how consistent everything, all the metrics have been, as well as the Climate Prediction Center now giving this a 60% probability of some sort of development in the next 7 days. So let's go ahead and show you this right here. A broad area of low pressure could form late this weekend or early next week over the northwestern Caribbean Sea. Thereafter, some slow development of the system is possible through the middle of next week while it moves slowly to the north or northwest over the northwestern Caribbean Sea or the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. 20% probability in the next 7 days. So we have that officially tagged. Things are about to get going. This is the official here we go moment right here as we continue to look at the data and continue to get more information for you guys as we look into this. Let's go ahead and start right here. We're not going to pay too much attention to Gordon or anything like that because I personally do not believe that it's going to organize or develop. But I will give you a quick update on it. Its current location is 21.5 degrees north, 47.9 degrees west. Maximum sustained winds are at 20 knots or 23 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure has risen to 1,009 millibars, and the radius of maximum winds is 120 nautical miles. It's just a remnant low at this current point, and it's something that I'm not really paying too much attention to. I can show you the latest track models right here. They're not going to really do that much. You have these track models having this staying out to sea, intensity runs. Majority of the models still want this to get up to tropical storm strength, with some still even wanting to get it up to hurricane strength. However, I'm finding that less and less likely as the system is still a remnant low. It's still looking completely disorganized on satellite right here, and I'm not seeing that much hope for it. When I was looking at it yesterday, it did have that popcorning convection I was talking about. Then it quickly faded away, and then we started to see a little bit more. It's just the convection has not been consistent for me, and it's over so much dry air that this is going to be it's going to have to go out. It's facing an uphill battle at this current point. There's no other way to describe it. I just tried to, and I stuttered a lot. There's no other way to describe it. It's an uphill battle, and all this convection is not really that sustaining or anything like that. So I'm just kind of throwing that out, at least for the current point in time. What I am going to pivot attention towards is this system in the Caribbean Sea. And the reason I'm paying attention to it is because look what we have starting to go on over here. You're starting to see a huge area of convection firing off the coast of Nicaragua right here. It's relatively well organized. You are starting to see maybe a little bit of outflow starting to get its act together right now. That might be something else. But ultimately, you are starting to see at least some sort of mesoscale outflow system going on right now. It's not synoptic scale because it's not large enough yet, but ultimately, what I will say about this is the area right here that could do it. And where it's heading down the road is in some of the best conditions I have ever seen for at least this current point. This gyre system is going to be moving through ocean heat content of over 200 in some areas, very warm waters, very weak wind shear, and plenty of moisture. That is a recipe for conducive strengthening, ladies and gentlemen. That is a huge problem right there. And the reason it's a huge problem is because millions of people are at risk for this. There is a potential threat with this right here. There's also a bunch of other ways the system could go. It could move a little bit further to the east and make landfall in Cuba. It could move a little bit further to the west and impact the Yucatan Peninsula. It could move through the Yucatan Straits, which, in my opinion, would be the worst-case scenario, considering that it's going to be staying over water and it's going to have more time to rapidly strengthen, rapidly intensify, and just continue to show off. And I've been talking to my guys at Storms United. We've been saying this for days. This has a very high ceiling. How high of a ceiling? We're not 100% sure. This system was just tagged last night. We need more information before we can even talk about intensity or anything like that, in terms of the official or at least the Storms United official forecast. So before you start pulling your guns out and putting us at gunpoint saying, Patrick, how strong is this going to be? Just give me some time. We need more information first. This was just tagged last night, and it's still a 20% probability of development. Right now, the best answer I can give you is I don't know. But what I can tell you is this has a very high ceiling. And in terms of a very high ceiling, like, we're talking major hurricane status type of ceiling. Not saying it's going to happen. Just before you start commenting, oh, Patrick, you're over-exaggerating this again. Come on, Patrick, you need to be more realistic. I'm just saying that's the ceiling. That's the ceiling. I just want to make that clear. Okay, now that I'm done being I'm done weirding you guys out. Let's go ahead and show you some of the dry air potential over here. There is a little bit of a dry air pocket to the north of this huge burst of convection right here, the north of this low pressure area right here, but in my opinion, it's not going to do much because there's not enough wind shear to get this into the core of it or anything like that. This convection is wrapping around and forming pretty nicely, and it has been for the last few hours. The main question I have right now is this going to sustain? Is it going to sustain and build on itself and quickly organize and quickly intensify, or is it going to take its time? Is it going to trade strengthening for organization, like a lot of these systems tend to do? Right now, we're going to have to wait and see. I think we'll have a better answer tomorrow to see if this is sustaining or not. But for now, we will have to pay attention to it. There's a bit of a dry air slot, but after that dry air slot, there is plenty of moisture until it gets to the Gulf of Mexico. And even then, there's really not going to be enough wind shear to stop this system from intensifying and choking it out or anything like that in terms of dry air getting into the core of it. There's really not going to be that much, and we'll get to the forecast in just a second, but ultimately, that's the stuff we're taking a look at. You have to look at the small things first before you start looking at the big stuff. Well, in this case, yes. Generally, you want to look at the big stuff first and then start narrowing it down to the small stuff. But in this exception, the small things I'm talking about are in terms of convection. Small things like that start to add up. You also have to pay attention to the wind shear. You also have to pay attention to the currents and everything like that, as well as the trough and the ridge. There is a trough right here off the coast of Florida. That's going to produce some wind shear for right now, but that trough is expected to move out of the region in the next few days, and that could be a very interesting situation, as we could have a ridge where this area has very low wind shear and can use that ridge to help enhance its outflow and really ramp up in intensification, as well as tighten its pressure gradient. So we'll pay attention to it. We'll keep you updated, but for now, all the conditions look really good for development in terms of the dry air and moisture and all of that. Let's go ahead and show you the sea surface temperatures, and we're going to go ahead and zoom in and take a look at the western half of the Atlantic. Here's what we're looking at. Where all this convection is firing off, where the low pressure system is going to potentially form, it's in an area of about 30 degrees Celsius. That is a lot of warm water, ladies and gentlemen. That is very warm water, and the main concern I have is if this system organizes and intensifies at a very fast rate, Then you're going to have a scenario where, okay, it's already established as a tropical cyclone, and then it enters the best conditions it possibly could. 31 plus degrees Celsius of waters. That is 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And that water goes about 500 feet deep. For those of you for reference, that's as tall as a lot of buildings. That's about 40% of the height of the Empire State Building, or 40% of the height of the Willis or Sears Tower in Chicago. That's how deep that water is. A lot of people don't understand that concept of it. But it always helps to kind of reference very famous buildings to kind of give you context to that. But that's how deep down the water goes. And you're also seeing all these 30-plus degrees Celsius waters going throughout much of the Gulf of Mexico over here. Granted, this part of the Gulf has cooled down a little bit. It's not the 31 degrees Celsius it was previously, but it's still 28, 29 degrees Celsius all the way up to the Florida Panhandle, and that's more than enough for conducive development and conducive strengthening. Even as the water gets shallower, thanks to the continental shelf up there. Let's go ahead and show you the ocean heat content as well. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a more recent map for you. Let's go ahead and go to the 18th. Here's the ocean heat content. Look at all this over here, where this system is expected to go. 175 to, in a lot of areas, 200 plus OHC. That is insane. And just to remind you guys, that has been sitting there since October of last year. Just for reference. And remember, it only takes one bad storm to make a season memorable. We already had Hurricane Beryl that just tore through the Caribbean Sea, caused so much damage. That's going to get retired by the NHC in April. I'm just going to say it right there. But what you're noticing now is you're seeing a lot better conditions than what Beryl witnessed in terms of ocean heat content. Yes, there was a lot of OHC over here. I can go ahead and show you what it looked like in June of 2024, just for context. Let's go ahead and pull up June 28th. This is what the OHC was on June 28th, 2024. There was about 125, 150 OHC over there. That is a lot of OHC, don't get me wrong. That's good for rapid intensification. But this is where we're at right now. Boom. 175 to 200 OHC. Much deeper waters now than there was with Beryl. And the reason Beryl didn't tap into that OHC very much was because it was moving too fast. It was moving at like 20-ish miles per hour throughout its entire trip until it got to the Yucatan Peninsula. Then it started to slow down a little bit. We're seeing much better water temperatures and much better ocean heat content than we did with Beryl. Just wanted to make that point very clear to you. Also, if this system establishes itself early enough and then taps into all of this, coupled with the low wind shear that is forecast to be over there, that is going to be a major issue. That is going to be a big problem for millions of people, not just in the Yucatan Peninsula, Jamaica, or the Cuba, but also on the Gulf Coast, because this is expected to move into the Gulf of Mexico, according to a lot of the operational runs and a lot of the ensembles. That's pretty much almost a given at this current point. And given that the fact that we're seeing a lot of wind shear over here just receding to the Gulf of Mexico, that's pretty interesting. But ultimately, you have this wind shear over here in the Gulf right now, but that's expected to move out, and a ridge is going to build in and allow for this wind shear to calm down to about 20-ish knots or so. Let's go ahead and show you the shear and moisture forecast just to kind of give you that right here. Here is the shear forecast I have for the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. Here's what we have pulled up for you right now. Wind shear is expected to stay mostly out of the Caribbean Sea. Yes, there will be a little bit more wind shear that moves into the area in the next 3 days or so, but that's not going to really do that much to hinder development or intensification or anything like that. Then you start to see this trough and this you start to see this ridge start to get its act together, and you see a bit of a lifting mechanism over here that lifts a lot of the wind shear out of the Gulf of Mexico. And that lack of wind shear right there is why this system is kind of forecasted to be as strong as it is, according to several runs right here. And it's not really going to return until after the system is expected to move through the region. That's the shear forecast for you. Let's go ahead and show you the moisture component. Moisture, yes, there is a little bit of dry air. We talked about that, but there is a huge moisture infusion thanks to the gyre that really allows for the western half of the Caribbean Sea to get much more moist, and then it spreads into the Gulf of Mexico. And because of the lack of wind shear, whenever the system organizes and develops, that dry air isn't really going to do that much to it, and that's going to give it a much easier time and a much better time for it to really ramp up and potentially sustain its strength and make landfall. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the moisture. Let's go ahead and show you some ensemble runs now. We're going to go ahead and show you the GFS. We're going to start with the 0Z GFS just to kind of give you an idea of what we were looking at. But here's the 0Z GFS ensemble run right now. 0Z GFS, majority of them want this into the Gulf of Mexico. There are still some outliers that want this into the Atlantic Ocean, not just in terms of the system making landfall in Florida and then moving into the Atlantic Ocean, but in terms of the system jerking to the east, making landfall in Cuba, and then impacting the Bahamas and all those areas right there to the east of Florida and east of the southeastern United States. No, the majority of them want this into the Gulf of Mexico. Where the system's going to make landfall is a lot more scattered. Don't get me wrong, we're seeing a lot of very intense scenarios as this enters the Gulf of Mexico, but scattered in where it wants to go. The track's a bit more difficult, but it will get more refined as time continues to go on and as we get more information. Here's the 12Z runs that we have right here. 12Z runs, a lot more refined, but this is just one run of the ensembles right here. Majority of them want this making landfall in Florida. That's pretty interesting, and that's pretty concerning to take a look at for those of you tuning in from the state over there, because if that's the case, we need to prepare. We need to pay very close attention to this. This could be a hurricane heading your way. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's getting possibilities there for sure. Let's go ahead and start with the 12Z European from yesterday. We're seeing those scattered scenarios once again. 0Z from today, let's take a look at that right now. A lot more refined. But the majority of the European does want this system to end, instead of going towards Florida, head towards barrel towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and then enter the Bay of Campeche or into the central Gulf of Mexico. And from where on out it makes landfall and all that stuff is a bit more ambiguous. So I wanted to go ahead and show you those as we are about to show the operational runs. We kind of already showed the European operational run in terms of the shear and moisture forecast, but the European's operational is pretty much the same as the ensembles. The European AI model is pretty interesting to take a look at. I want to show you the 0Z very quickly because the European AI model does want this entering the Yucatan Peninsula and then heading towards heading towards the Gulf Coast over here, although it's a bit more finicky than other runs in the past. So definitely something to pay attention to. The 6Z AI model is still picking up on this and wants the system to make landfall near Beaumont, Texas as a Category 2 or 3 hurricane. GFS run, we can go ahead and pull that up for you. This is the 12Z GFS showing you this right here. 12Z GFS wants the system to enter the Yucatan Peninsula and get up to hurricane strength before making landfall near the Big Bend of Florida and then moving out into the southeastern United States and really strengthening thanks to the Gulf Stream over here before moving on off the East Coast. CMC run, generally the most consistent out of all of these model runs right here, which has been found pretty interesting. Once this entering the Yucatan Peninsula and then making landfall as a Category 2 hurricane near Mobile, Alabama, near Gulf Shores, near the Florida Panhandle, those areas right there. I did find that kind of interesting. 0Z run was showing it a little bit further to the east. So overall, we have seen a little bit of a trend to the west, and that's because of the ridge that's building in that allows it to shift a little bit further to the west, which could potentially put Louisiana, potentially put Mississippi, Alabama, and other areas on the Gulf Coast in play for this tropical system to organize and develop and potentially hit. So I wanted to go ahead and show you these runs because we are getting a more agreement with the models now, and the NHC has tagged this as well. Whenever you see consistent model runs like this organizing and developing, that's a very big problem, and that's a very major issue. right there, especially for all the people that are going to be potentially in harm's way. And that's why I do the stuff I do right here, and that's why I'm going to continue to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather. Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. If you want to be an official sponsor and support the channel, be sure to join the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. Link to that is the first link in the description down below. Also, if you want to come hang out with us at Storms United and talk tropics with that, we've been doing it all season and we will continue to. Be sure to join our Discord server. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.